Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the Terrence Williamson Author Podcast. Today we have Tim Blackett with us. He's an author himself, and a good friend from since childhood. How you doing, Tim?
How's it going? I'm all right. How are you?
Good. So I don't have anything really planned out for this.
Cool.
But I thought it would be fun just to have you on, have a quick chat. So might as well jump right in.
Sure.
Are you? I think last we talked, you mentioned something about you being close to being done with that manuscript. Is that right?
The short fiction manuscript,
Yeah.
or the yeah, I've finished my manuscript, short fiction, and I've sent it out for publication here and there to different small presses in Canada. It was accepted at one. I think I was telling you, it was accepted at one publication, and they were going ahead with it, and then they said, like 2 weeks later, they said, actually, we're filing for bankruptcy, so we can't publish it. So, yeah. So I went from there and I sent it off to a few others, but that was kind of smack dab in the middle of COVID, so I haven't heard back from anyone.
Yeah, it's funny because Sorry, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
Well, I was just thinking, like, with respect to, like, there's a lot of traditional publishers out there, and I think I was telling you this, but then there's this guy on my Facebook page, and he's saying that he's with 3 different traditional publishers. One faked their own death, one went bankrupt, and another one just didn't do anything with the book. So it really depends on which traditional publisher you get with. Sometimes you still have to do all the work, but.
Well, the first one was, they're called Kato Books. They're out of Moose Jaw. And they're fairly well known around the literary fiction world. They publish a lot of short fiction and different things, and like lots of their authors have been nominated or won things like the Giller Prize and stuff. So I knew that they were like a reputable place. They actually asked to read the manuscript after it won the John V. Hicks Long Manuscript Prize. It got second. Oh, nice. So they asked to read it, and then they wanted to publish it, and then I guess whoever asked didn't realize they were heading for bankruptcy.
No. Before I forget, your thing says Derby Memes. Does Derby have like a meme page and stuff, or?
Yeah, he stole my my account to make his YouTube stuff. I don't know.
Oh, okay. Oh, that's fun. Derby is Tim's son, for anyone who's listening.
Yeah. So he changes my name all the time. It's Derby Memes, Derby Videos, Derby Gamer, Noob, all this stuff. I've lost track.
It was weird when my daughter learned what the word noob was.
Yeah.
And she was calling me a noob. Like, where'd you learn noob?
Yeah, my kids have all these different things that they say, and I'm just like, I feel like a really old, like, boomer style dad, because I'm like, what does that even mean? they're hip with the times.
Yeah. Okay, so that short fiction, just so that everyone else knows, is it a collection of short fictions for an overall narrative, or is it a bunch of different narratives within the whole manuscript?
Yeah, they're all connected stories, but my goal when writing it was that each story would be able to like stand on its own. You don't need any of the other stories to read and understand each story, but as you go through the collection, I think it becomes like the connections make each story stronger. In my mind, that was the notes from the publisher, was that they didn't know whether to call it a novel or a collection of stories, even though the stories do stand on their own. The premise was my very first story is called, or the titular story is called Grandview Drive. It has one main character who is kind of a loner, but he imagines himself living amongst these people that he spies on through their window. He's kind of a peeping Tom.
Hmm.
So there's like 6 or 8 different families or single people that he kind of like, he drives down this road, Grandview Drive, and just kind of like spies on people and imagines he has this fantasy life of living amongst these people. And he romanticizes these. Each one, there's like a perfect life he's living where the kids love him and he's just like happy and blah, blah, blah.
Hmm.
But then the rest of the stories take individuals or families from that he's spying on, and I tell their stories kind of, and none of them are as romantic as he believes.
Hmm.
And he never really meets any of them
Yeah,
before he.
I read you sent it off to me a long time ago, and I read the I don't know if you drafted it again after you sent it to me, but I really liked what you had written there.
Yeah.
So
It's gone through a number of drafts, and I took a couple stories out and put some other ones in. I was working on that book for so long. Like, I wrote this first story in 2008, and I don't think I finished the last one until 2018. But I was going to school and working full time and had 2 little kids and stuff. But
yeah.
I'm
Now
sipping on books, just so you know.
you're fine. So is there anywhere that someone can find it, or is it like, have you
No, I
self-published
haven't
it?
posted it. I'm a stickler for this traditional publishing thing. I want to exhaust all of those before I self-publish, so I haven't put it anywhere online.
Hmm.
One of the stories was published in a book called Swift Flowing, and I think you can get the book on Amazon. Swift Flowing. It's a
Okay.
collection of Saskatchewan writers' poems and stories. So, a story
Okay.
called Mumble Mumble was on there,
Hmm.
in there.
Okay. Well, if I find it, I'll post a link on the YouTube for people to have a peek at it.
Cool.
So your other manuscript, do you mind reminding me about what that one is about?
Okay, that one is. I'm working on it now. I'm about like, I don't know, 120,000 words into it.
Hmm.
Uh, it is. I'm calling it a fictionalized memoir. I've been really into this genre of fiction called autofiction, where typically the author writing takes itself as the main character of the novel and writes what seems to be a mostly true story of their own life, but in a
Hmm.
way that they call it fiction. Well, I'm calling mine fiction to get around a few things, and because it gets into pretty detailed memories, but then I don't have the greatest memory, so I just like stretch the few memories that I do have to like tell the story I'm trying to tell.
Right.
But yeah, so like Tim is the main character, and like my mom is my mom, and uh, all my I haven't changed any names or anything yet, so
Hmm.
it reads to me, it reads like a memoir, but I'm calling it fiction because it's not entirely
Yeah.
true.
Um, are you able to tell us a bit of what it kind of follows, or are you wanting to keep that
Yeah,
close to your chest?
yeah, no. It's basically because, well, I grew up pretty religious, um, and I've kind of gone away from that for the most part. And my mom and my family has a hard time understanding why and stuff, and that like any real conversation we have doesn't go very far, and we end up arguing, kind of,
Hmm.
or whatever. And then a lot of things, I've been depressed for much of my life, and um, I ended up getting divorced about 5 years ago. And these are things that my family seems to be unable to understand. So the premise of the book is like it's formatted as a letter to my mom. I speak
Hmm.
a lot to you, second person, and the you is my mom.
Mm.
So I'm basically trying to explain who I am and how I got to be who I am. It
Mm.
sounds like a lot of like navel gazing and stuff, but I'm really exploring the things we were taught within the church and how that affected the way I thought about myself and how the way it contributed to my depression and stuff.
Mm.
But it's not as grim as I make it sound. I don't think. I hope by the end it'll be something of a hopeful novel. And if
Mm.
my family were to read it, there's bits they won't like for sure, but I hope that they'll be able to understand me a little bit more.
Well, I think that's a really good way to go about it. If to have it as a narrative to explain what you're feeling or thinking, I think is a really good idea.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that might allow it a shift in perspective, possibly.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, no, I think that's quite profound.
I'm thinking a lot as I'm writing, I'm thinking a lot about storytelling and the way people tell stories about themselves.
Mm.
Because I'm finding even as I'm writing these memories, right, I can also easily add to those memories, or I'm more interested maybe in the things we take out of those memories. So I'm not sure if that makes any sense, but like the first
Mhm.
section of the book, I tell a story of, but when I'm between like 6 years old to graduating university in my 30s, right? So it's a pretty straightforward chronological narrative where I'm pinpointing different times where I felt were important or affected me. But then when I'm done that, for the second part, I kind of start all over and say and talk about storytelling and the way well, just what I said, like because I was married and dating Chelsea, my ex-wife, from when I was like 15 years old to 32. We split when I was 32, and so in the first section I've told a whole story of my life, but I basically just allude to her briefly when she was like part of a story, which means I told the whole story of my life without telling anything about the person I spent half of it with. So in this part, I kind of
Mm.
start over with a new narrative that's still a story of me from the ages of 6 to like now, but it leaves all the relationship stuff kind
Mm.
of focusing on relationship stuff and my issues around intimacy and blah blah blah, which also stems, I think, from religion. But the point is,
Mm.
the thing I'm interested in, and I talk a lot about it. I keep bringing in all of these auto-fictional novels that I'm reading, and it turns into little essays about these novels, which I hope are interesting for people.
Mm.
But yeah, so I'm talking and thinking a lot
Mm.
about how we tell stories, why we tell stories, how we can so easily edit our own true stories to say whatever we want to say. Um, but hopefully in like a truthful, honest, and vulnerable way.
Yeah, so speaking of memory, I think that's quite neat because there's so many times when we do bend it to shape either like our perspective or our worldview. Um, are there any particular memories that you had that you feel like you kind of either, um, like you said, you kind of use,
Yeah.
or are there any particular memories that you feel, I'm not exactly sure how to phrase this, might be wrong, or either you feel that you may have conflated?
Yeah. Okay. Well, there's one example. I tell a story of when I'm pretty young. I remember going on vacation to BC, to visit my aunt and uncle who live in Souk, BC, on the island.
Mm.
But also part of that vacation, we visited my grandma and great aunt in Penticton. And in the novel, I tell the story of going with my Auntie Gay and Uncle Don to their church in Souk. And the pastor there, whatever, was asking the kids if they remember the story of Noah's Ark, and none of the kids were answering. And I knew all the answers, so I gave all the answers. But so this is just a basic thing, like with the faulty memory thing, because then I was talking about it with Joni, my little sister, and she says she's pretty sure we went to Auntie Eileen's church in Penticton and not Auntie Gay's church in Souk. So it's just like a weird little. But I have like a pretty clear memory of Auntie Gay being there with me, being excited that I'm answering these questions. So simple stuff like that. And then even more so, I talk quite a bit about childhood and my relationship with my mom. And I spend quite a bit of time talking about how I can't really remember her being overly affectionate with us. Like, I don't remember hugs and kisses and cuddling on the couch or just playing with my mom at a park and stuff like that. I have very few of these memories. My dad was more active in playing with us and stuff. But especially the hugs, because I think about my relationship with my kids, and they come and hug me for kind of no reason all the time, and so I wonder in the book whether I should have been initiating these intimate moments, because from my memory I can't remember her initiating these moments. But I was showing Chantel, my fiance, this my mom had kept all of these keepsakes from over the years, from kindergarten to grade 12, like any artwork that I did and stuff. And in grades 2 and 3, there's in both years, there's a card I made for mom that the teachers gave that had little prompts like, what's the best thing your mom cooks for supper? What's your mom's favorite color? How teachers get kids to reply to these things. In both years, one of the questions is, what's your favorite thing about your mom? And in both years, I said her hugs and kisses. So that's like 7-8-year-old Tim saying he loves mom's hugs and kisses. But then there's grown Tim remembering his childhood as like being hug and kissless.
Interesting.
So that threw a real like wrench into the narrative for sure. I started thinking about that a lot, and I'll end up writing about that too, the way memory, like, I don't know what that means really. Also,
sorry, go ahead.
Well, just, I don't know also if this means anything or not, but in that same little booklet, one of the things, there's just a blank page, and the prompt says, write a picture of you hugging your mom. And the picture 8-year-old Tim drew was like two little figures on like the far sides of the page, and they're not even touching each other. They have their hands towards each other, but they're like 6 inches apart from each other. But then I also think maybe I just didn't know how to draw two people hugging when I was I was never a good artist. But yeah, the point is I'm just having fun, but also it's like a super weird and kind of uncanny thing where I'm like, these memories seem pretty real to me, and then I find evidence that maybe they're not real. So kind of messes up the book, but
yeah.
Then yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, I just wanted to talk about memory a bit, because I remember when I wrote the book about Lucian, one of the things in the beginning, as I was mentioning how my dad ruled with an iron fist.
Yeah.
Because growing up, I perceived him as very strict. And I remember my dad read that, and he was really surprised. And he said, "Did you think I was strict?" And I was going, "Yeah." But then I started looking back over it truthfully, and I was kind of going, maybe it wasn't as strict as I thought it was. And so I was reading. Carl Jung has a book out. One of them was about dream interpretation, because basically his theory is that the subconscious affects the conscious.
Yeah.
And so there's one of his patients that had this dream about his dad, who was drunk driving, ran into something, was belligerent, and all that stuff. And this dream was really troubling to the patient because he had a really good relationship with his father. So Carl Jung kept going into it deeper and deeper and deeper. And eventually his theory, whether it was right or not, because it's so abstract, but his theory was that the son was so close to the father that the son wasn't able to kind of grow on his own, right? Because they had such a good relationship, the father and them were so close, and so he needed to kind of step out and develop a bit for himself. So in his subconscious was painting the father as a terrible character, trying to separate him. Yeah. That's how he perceived it. So I thought it was quite interesting looking back at how, because my relationship with my dad is really good. But growing up, I think it was a really good environment and all that stuff. So I think the subconscious was trying to paint him as this authoritarian, iron-fisted character, so that I kind of went away and did my own thing. But that's just interesting.
Yeah, that is interesting. So I'm wondering if I'm kind of doing the same because, well, I do talk in the book about how I felt the same, but with my mom. Like my dad was less of the authoritarian. Mom was the boss kind of thing. So I have this idea of her not ruling with an iron fist, but like we couldn't get away with things from my mom, and yeah, this idea that she wasn't as affectionate as maybe I wanted a mothering figure to be, and I think she had a hard time telling me she was proud of me for certain things or whatever. But yeah, as I move through the book, I'm starting to wonder about these memories is all. And so, but it really does throw kind of a wrench into the idea of the novel, because how can I write what I think is honestly if I don't even trust my own memories? At the same time, that's kind of the point of the whole thing. And the memories I do have, whether they are true to life or not, they have affected the way I walk through the world as a person. So whether they're true or not, it's how I feel. And they've made me who I am in a lot of ways anyway. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But it's a weird thing.
Yeah. I can imagine that it's such a good meditative practice to write fiction about yourself.
Yeah. It's pretty cathartic and all of that, but I'm always in my own head about, because the stuff I write, I want it to be worthwhile for other people. What I don't like when I'm reading is when I feel like this is just sort of someone else's self-therapy, and I'm thinking, why do I care about this? I don't want people to be reading my book and being like, okay, that's interesting, but why do I care? Why should I care? I want you to actually.
I think your narrative would be appealing to a lot of people. There's a lot of people in your situation. I myself, I'm pretty close to your situation as well, because we're so close to how we grew up in the private school. Now, I suppose we can get into this. And I guess the intention of this isn't to argue. It's just for you to, I'm offering you a platform or whatever to say it. So is there anything specific that you felt that caused you to leave religion, or was it a series of things that you felt?
Oh no, it was years and years of this thing and then that thing and then this thing, and like having these questions and then spending a year like reading about this question or that question, and like, well, that's kind of what the book is about, because my family seems to have this idea that I was like hurt or offended by one or another person in the church, and because that person did something to me or said something, I was mad at God and I left. But this isn't the case. You know, from a pretty young teenager through till when I finally decided decided this isn't for me. It was just like years and years and years of questions and debates in my own mind and reading from this side and that side, and like I wanted so badly to believe everything, you know, like I did everything I could to be the good, proper Christian, to like devote myself to it. I got a theology degree, all of these things. Like I was desperate for it to be true, but after so many years of just questioning and thinking about it, I came to a place where I was like, where I am right now, it's not anything that I care about. I don't think, for growing up our whole lives, this religion that we grew up in informed like every decision we made, every action we made, like everything I did. In my head, I was thinking, is this acceptable in the eyes of the Lord, or am I going to get in trouble from my parents because it's not this or that? Or so going from it informing every aspect of my life to now, it's not like I don't mind if anyone else takes solace and peace and is able to like find joy in it, then go ahead and do that. But for me, I just don't care about it anymore in a way that affects my decision making or anything I do.
This is gonna sound odd as a Christian to say this, but I'm happy for you.
Thank you.
You know, because you did do your own research. You came to a conclusion after years. Like it wasn't just a decision. Like you said, you didn't just get offended at someone and stormed out of church, which is what I did. Funny enough, I was on another podcast. An Irishman actually talked about you briefly, like for 2 seconds. I didn't mention your name or anything, but I said it's kind of funny because me and you both grew up in the charismatic, and then you're the one who introduced me to the Anglican Church. Why I love it right now.
Yeah,
it's kind of funny. It's kind of funny because when I tell people, it's like, oh yeah, Tim introduced me to St. Mary's.
Do you still go there every now and then?
Yeah, quite often actually. I'm part of
cool.
Like Claude, the rector of St. Mary's. He's getting me a bit more involved because I wanted to do something with music there. So I was thinking about starting a choir, which I think we're going to do after baby's born. So we're going to start a choir. But then there's also some stuff for like the liturgy that I might be involved with, some of the chanting and stuff, which I'm so excited about. It was tons of fun. We did it.
Cool. I do meet St. Mary sometimes. Like I do, just like the ritual aspect of it. How it was the services are so like organized, and I liked the little prayer guides that they have that they tell you which dioceses are connected. Like across the world, there's like little old ladies in Ireland praying the same prayers as I was every day. I kind of like that stuff. But
it's true.
Like I don't claim to have any definitive answer, right? I guess I'm agnostic, but I feel like I just need to have kind of. Sometimes I feel like I need just the balls to say I'm atheist, but I'm obviously agnostic. I don't know, and I don't know anything. So at the point where I'm at right now, I'm okay just not knowing, and I kind of just I'm not caring, and I'm okay with not caring. And I feel more at peace than I have maybe ever in my life. Just kind of living life. It took me a long time after like officially leaving, even though that was over a series of years. But then when you have this thing telling you this is how your life should go and this is what you need to live for your whole life, and then that's all of a sudden gone, I was like, I felt really lost, like as if I had like like the floor had fallen out or whatever, and now I'm like, well, if I'm not this Christian person, what am I? I had no idea what to live for, and I fell into this like super nihilistic phase where I was like, nothing matters and life is meaningless, and we should all just like end things as fast as possible. But this has moved into I think I'm still kind of nihilistic in that I do believe life is meaningless. But this has turned into a hopeful idea for me, because if my life as a whole is meaningless, then that means right now I get to choose what makes life worth living. So like, it provides me an aspect of freedom where like I don't need to stress as much about doing the things I feel I ought to do, but what right now gives my life meaning. So like for me, that's doing as much as I can for my kids, for them to be able to be like functioning people. I think it's hard work being a person, no matter who you are. And so now I'm trying to teach these kids how to be little people.
Yeah.
And writing is a lot of what I feel like. I feel more myself when I'm lost in a story or lost in writing than anything else. So
interesting. Well, to paraphrase from Nietzsche, who was the father of nihilism, he quoted that all life is suffering, and it's our responsibility to find meaning in the suffering. Which essentially is what religion can be, is that attempt to find meaning in the suffering. But I guess just speaking of nihilism, so obviously writing would provide you with some meaning, but is there other things? Obviously, fiance, congratulations, by the way.
Yeah, thanks.
But do you find anything else as I suppose a non-believer that gives you a sense of meaning?
Well, yeah, like I put a lot of importance in like a creative life, so that's writing, but also like reading as much as possible, and I guess I spent a lot of time in my head thinking about storytelling and the ways we talk about ourselves. I think for me the essential question of literature is basically, how should a person be? Or what does it mean to be a person? What does it mean to be a good person? So I'm always thinking of this idea. For a long time, that's always been my sort of underlining theory of literature. When I was a Christian, and this question, how should a person be, or what does it mean to be a good person, came up, I felt like the answers to those questions inevitably led to God. So I felt like even the act of writing a story that never mentions God, but is really thinking hard about what it means to be human, if thinking seriously about those stories, it would eventually point you to God. But now, having that part removed from my whole worldview, I guess I just think it should push people, or it pushes me when I'm reading good literature, to think, what am I doing to be good? I don't know what good means. Well, for me, it means being kind and not hurting people. I don't know. I don't know if I've answered your question.
No, I think you did. Not really looking. I guess I think the point of it is not.
What really gives me meaning? What do I find gives me meaning? Yeah, the creative life is I used to put a lot of importance in my job meaning something, and I work at Rancherlo, and in a lot of ways it does mean something. But I always felt like I wasn't doing enough because it's kind of Groundhog Day there with the issues and everything. Like maybe there's not as much progress as I would like or whatever. But I've been really trying to repurpose or reorganize my thinking along the lines of my work. That when it comes down to it, I'm providing the clients I work with like a safe, loving place to be every day. They know they're safe with me. I treat them with respect and stuff. And I feel like maybe that's meaningful. You know, I'm thinking this way in ways where a year ago I just wanted to get out of there so bad because I wasn't doing anything. But I've really been, yeah, just thinking it really does align with my worldview about how do we treat the least of these, which comes from the Bible.
Mm.
But you know, it says a lot about a society when we talk about the ways we treat the like poor and disabled. And then I have this job where I'm working directly with disabled people, and I'm thinking this is meaningless, whereas it shouldn't be, because I mean, kind of anyone could do my job, but I don't think everyone is going to be as I don't know invested in these lives as I believe I could be. There are people I work with on staff who are just like fully devoted. This is like their life passion. They just love working with disabled people, and like they feel fulfilled, I think, by doing the work they do. I've never felt that, but I'm just saying there are better people than I doing the job. But I think there are worse, very much worse people than I that could be doing the job. So for now, while I'm there, I'm gonna put all I can into just providing like a safe, loving, nurturing place for the people.
That's quite neat.
And I feel since I've had this brief shift in viewpoint, I'm enjoying my job quite a bit more.
Oh yeah. That's fantastic.
Karaoke provides meaning.
There you go. Yeah, you've been doing karaoke for a few years, hey?
Yeah, it started like when I split from Chelsea. I was like, I felt really alone. I felt like I didn't have a lot of friends I could just call up and be like, let's go do something. They're all like married with kids or just lost in the split or whatever. And so then I was talking to my friend Tara Ross, Zach's little sister.
Oh yeah.
She was living in BC, and we were texting, and I was like, I just wish I had someone I could go do anything with. And she's like what? I'm like, I don't know, anything, like karaoke or trivia nights or whatever. And she's like, just go by yourself. You're a Libra, aren't you? Whatever that means. And I was like, you'd really go to karaoke by yourself? She's like, yeah, I do all the time. And so I was like, fine, I'm gonna go. And I walked over to O'Hanlon's by myself, sang karaoke, and then it became like a not weekly ritual, but anytime I didn't have the kids on the weekend, I'd like went to karaoke.
Yeah.
But then but I started hanging out with Chris Warby quite a lot. And turns out he likes karaoke too. So we would go all the time. And then I met Chantel, my fiance. And turns out her and her mom were like regulars at Westerns, which is only like 5 blocks away from my place. So yeah, we go pretty much every Friday. I proposed to her on karaoke night. It's just, to me, it feels like church. We're in a place like gathered together with a bunch of people I probably wouldn't hang out with otherwise, doing the same thing, and like the singing isn't the same as church, but we're like we all sing Neil Diamond together, or queen or whatever, whenever, and it just feels like there's a connectedness there that I don't find pretty much anywhere else. But it reminds me of church.
You have a good voice.
Oh, thanks. I mean, I'm no Terrence Williamson, but
well, we all can't be, but yeah, because I saw the video of you proposing.
Yeah.
And I think I was with my wife, and she's like, "Hey, it's not bad actually."
I like that people say that, and I also get a kick out of the fact that people are always surprised. But I don't think I have a good voice. I think I'm a good. I can mimic other artists' voice fairly well.
Oh, okay.
Do you know what I mean? Like if I'm just singing a song that I wrote, I think my voice would be pretty flat and boring. But I tend to have an okay ear for, like, I can sing. I sing Modest Mouse all the time, and then like Dashboard and stuff. But what I'm doing is mimicking their voice, and obviously I don't sound exactly the same, but I can do an okay job of that.
Yeah.
But I don't think I'm like, you're writing originals and singing and with your sultry, sexy voice.
Well, I'm kind of the opposite. I have a really hard time singing covers or other songs that when I write my own, I seem to be able to do better. Except there's a couple songs I found that were really good range for me, like House of the Rising Sun. That one was tons of fun.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Now, I thought I'd throw this in there. I don't know if this is true of me or not, but I kind of like, speaking of agnosticism.
Yeah.
Little trivia fact for one. I think Mark Twain invented the word, didn't he? Because I think being atheist was illegal, so he invented the term agnostic.
Oh yeah.
Which, very Mark Twain thing to do. Very clever. But I think it's such a good position to be in. Because I find myself as a Christian agnostic, if that's such a thing. Or if that's what's the word that you say when two things are opposing? Oxymoron. Is that the word? Yeah. Might just be more the moron part, but so I feel like I'm more in like the Christian agnostic, where I believe it's real and I enjoy it quite a bit, but I don't know, right?
Yeah.
I'm not 100% certain. I think that kind of bugged me about the charismatic, where you have to, there's the idea that you believe the famous phrase, without a shadow of a doubt.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, I always had doubts.
Yeah. Have you heard of a thing called the Squim scale?
No, what's that?
I just Googled it. But I think Dawkins made it.
Oh, okay.
I'm not a huge Dawkins fan, but I feel like this is useful. It's basically his scale of where you fall on the theism spectrum.
Interesting.
So he calls number 1 is strong theist. I do not question the existence of God. I know he exists, which is what we grew up as, I would say. And then 2 is de facto theist. I cannot know for certain, but I strongly believe in God, which might be a lot of people we grew up with. And then there's weak agnostic. I am very uncertain, but I am inclined to believe in God. Pure agnostic, God's existence and non-existence are exactly probable. Weak agnostic, I do not know whether God exists, but I'm inclined to be skeptical. And then there's de facto atheist, which I cannot know for certain but I think God is very improbable. And strong atheist is, I'm 100% sure there is no God.
Interesting. I think I fit in between the weak and the de facto.
Yeah. I don't know where I fit on that. I'm probably de facto atheist. Cannot know for certain, but I think God is very improbable. Probable.
Interesting.
And moving towards number 7. To me, at least the Abrahamic religions or whatever just don't make any sense. And that's all I really know. I haven't looked too much into anything else.
I think an interesting thing about people when you fill out those things is there's a lot of people who say they're atheist who kind of, I don't know if they're entirely atheists, and there's a lot of people who are Christian who I don't know if they're entirely Christian. I think we're all a really good mix, right?
Yeah.
Um,
You probably swim around on the spectrum throughout the
yeah.
day. I don't know.
It's kind of like politics. In some cases I'm left, some cases I might be right.
Yeah.
Some cases I'm right in the center. I'm mostly center, I think. Except Max sent me this thing, like when we're doing like getting ready for the elections, like you can fill out all this information to find out where you fit on the political spectrum.
Yeah.
And I was kind of surprised that I was on the right.
Oh, interesting.
I thought I'd be right in the center, but I was kind of in the center. I was more like, so they have like economic left, and then authoritarian left, I think it is, and then economic right and authoritarian right. So I was just like just below economic right and slightly in authoritarian right, which I thought was kind of funny because I don't.
Brings off, Terry.
Yeah, because I was like, I don't feel like I don't agree with anything of like the People's Party of Canada. I don't agree with anything of theirs.
Yeah.
So why would it put me in the same box that they were?
You should send me that.
Yeah, they were like really far down right, and then I was kind of like just in like the same box as they were on that little 4-box grid.
Interesting.
Yeah,
I took a similar test, but it only told me what party platforms I most align with in Canada.
Okay.
So not like a political philosophy box or whatever. So, but they always just tell me I should vote Green Party.
Oh, really?
Which I think pretty far left. Yeah. It's always like 76% Green Party or something like that.
Crazy. Yeah. Did you vote for Green Party then?
This year I didn't. I have almost every election since Harper's second election. But I sometimes feel like it's just throwing a vote away.
Yeah.
So this year I voted NDP, which is also throwing it away in Saskatchewan. But
that's what really bothers me about politics is that it really is almost, well, I guess in Canada it's a bit better with having a bit more than just it being bipartisan. Sorry. Like in the States, if it's either Republican or Democratic, nobody else has a chance. In Canada, like NDP, I think would have a chance. Green Party, possibly, but it's almost always either liberal or conservative.
Well, historically, we've only had a liberal or conservative prime minister, right? But it's not, because the NDP and the other parties can win seats, but it's better than American system, but it's still a flawed system. But I don't know how to fix that. Like everyone's like, yeah, we need voter reform. Trudeau ran, he promised he would reform it, which is crappy that he didn't, like broke the promise or whatever. But also, like, I have no idea what it should be instead. I'm not smart enough to figure out what it should be.
There's, do you know who Brett Weinstein is?
No.
I believe he's a biologist. He came up with an interesting idea about in the States how to fix things. He thought of having a 2-party state where you'd have basically 2 presidents, so one who's center left and one who's center right, which I thought might be kind of an interesting idea. That way everyone's
and these two are elected through the party and then
I don't know the
general election, or
I don't know exactly. I don't know the entire theory that he has laid out. I just know the headline of having a 2-party state, one from center left, one from center right.
They'd have to find someone from center left.
Yeah. Well, he mentioned a few people that I kind of thought were interesting.
Like, I'm just thinking, America, like Biden in America is left. But if Biden were anywhere else in the world, he'd be like center at best. Like America is so far right that their left-wing politicians are not really left. Other than they want to legalize weed, I guess. I don't know. Like
I see what you're saying.
They talk about climate change and all of the things left-leaning people want to talk about, but they don't actually do anything for it. You know, or gun, like all the things they think that are left in America are basically just like center lines, like basic precautionary measures around gun control. That's not a left-wing idea. Like you should know that you're not mentally unstable before you have a gun. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, there's so many of those issues in the States, and I think part of the problem is that it's like it is pretty bipartisan. So any stance you take throws you into one camp or the other, which it's unfortunate because there's some things that shouldn't throw you into one of the other positions.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like, I guess we can talk about guns because I mean, here in Canada, I don't know anybody who's been shot. I know a few people who have guns.
Yeah.
But almost nobody. And I hate guns. I get called a beta for it, but
you get called a what?
Beta male.
Oh. Who calls you a beta?
Some of the alphas.
Goddamn alphas.
Yeah, it's funny because I was sick a couple last when we're supposed to do this Friday. I was so sick, and so I because my daughter came home Wednesday, and like I was sick the weekend before, not too bad, but enough, and then my daughter came home Wednesday with a fever and throwing up, and then it got to me like immediately, and then I was really sick. I was making a joke that I didn't get the Delta variant, I got the Beta variant.
Seriously.
But I mean, like, I hate guns, and I would never. It's a hard thing to understand because I understand the right-wing perspective of not letting the government be too powerful, and you have your own protection against the government. I get that, but we've seen that that's never been the case.
Yeah.
Right. Other than if you go back to the early 20th century when you see, Stalinist Russia or Hitler's Germany when they took away the guns. We get that. But I mean, that's why we have a democracy here.
Yeah.
So I don't really know what the answer is for the States when it comes to that.
Yeah, I don't know. Like to me it just seems logical to have, like, okay, if you're a hardcore gun enthusiast and you think you can't take my guns away because I'm a responsible gun owner. I follow all the safety measures and blah 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 blah. Like, shouldn't you be part of the group that is advocating for stricter measures to keep everyone safe? Because you're already following them. You're already going to be responsible. There's no problem for you jumping through the hoops or whatever it's called. Like, no one's going to take your guns because you're doing it properly. But if there's the minimal gun control laws that say you need a background check or whatever, we just want to make sure you're capable of being a responsible gun owner before you're a gun owner. I feel like that's just like, well, how is that impeding on your rights? I don't know.
Yeah. But even then, like, if someone passes a background check, like, it takes, like, you get a bad day in you. You got that gun.
Yeah, that's totally true too.
So that's what kind of concerns me. It's like, well, these background checks, I suppose they do help. And if we take away guns, are we going to take away violence? No, but we could take away the terror of this kind of violence. I mean, more people die from knife wounds than they die from gun wounds in the States.
Yeah, I've read that.
But still, I mean, dying by being shot up in a mall is a horrific thing to do.
Yeah.
Or being stabbed. Either way. I mean, it's just, I don't know what the answer is for the States.
No, I'm not
It's
smart enough, and I haven't thought about it or read enough to actually
mm,
understand all of the nuance of the thing. But to me, it just seems like the way people get on the internet, Americans get on the internet, and they're like, "You can't
mm.
take my gun," and all this stuff. Like they just sound like crazy people.
We'll probably get some fun comments
We're
on
in
this one
Canada,
too.
and like there's gun violence here too, and all of that. But like it just, I don't know. It just seems it's such a
Hmm.
foreign world. The
Yeah.
U.S. seems just like such a foreign, weird. They have
Hmm.
such a just like such a unique worldview of being
Hmm.
raised in that bubble of superiority. Like it's like they whatever they believe on an individual level. They've
Hmm.
been taught to believe they're so like special
Hmm.
that if they form a belief, they think this is the belief,
Hmm.
um, and it's important that everyone else believes because
Hmm.
I already know it's right. There's there seems to
Yeah.
be. I mean, there's very smart and intelligent and uh, like there's 300 and however many million people there. So
Hmm.
obviously you can't just paint them with the same brush, but it feels like
Hmm.
on Facebook and whatever that everyone's just like incapable of shifting
Hmm.
their view in any way. Like it just is like,
Hmm. Yeah, it's true. Like even some people who I'd say are moderately left, they would still say stuff like America's the greatest country in the world,
yeah,
right? Only people who are pretty like on the far left, like Antifa or something like that, would be pretty against it. But it seems like there's like no bridge between it, right?
yeah,
Um, yeah, it's like my kind of theory is if you look at the world as like say England is the parents, right? And they're kind of and then America was their child when they came over to colonize, and then the child broke off from the parents, and the parents are kind of looking at them and going like, what the hell happened to you? And the child is acting like all arrogant, right? Like that we're the
yeah.
best in the world. um
That's hilarious.
I was looking at this like TikTok thing about serial killers per country. And it's funny because it's like going by like a bunch of different countries. And England, I think was second up there with 166, and then America was at 3,200,
Oh my god,
like blowing every other country out of the world.
crazy.
It's like what
It's
the hell is
wild.
happening? Because I don't know. Maybe something about like speaking of like gun rights and them saying you can't take my guns, it's my rights and all that stuff. Sure, but I think that there's a part where the state goes beyond freedom into licentiousness,
Yeah,
where they say, I have, free speech. I can say whatever I want. I can do whatever I want without, and then getting upset when there's consequences from what you say.
yeah,
Like, sure, you can say whatever you want. We're not going to put you in jail because you spoke out against the state. But if you say something like the Holocaust never happened and you lose friends and platforms deplatform you, that's
yeah.
kind of on you.
They also have a weird thing as far as like social media. Like, okay, freedom of speech. I think most people understand what you're saying. That means the state can't punish you for speaking against them or saying, you know.
Yeah.
But like Facebook and all these places are private companies with who are trying to make money.
Hmm.
That's the bottom line. And so for them to be like, yeah, you can't say that, we're banning you or whatever, it's just a business decision based on if they continue to let bigots be bigots on their platform.
Mm.
People who aren't bigots might leave and they'll lose money.
Mm.
What I'm saying is freedom of speech doesn't mean a private company can't tell you not to say something.
Mm.
You know?
Yeah.
It all it means is the government can't
Hmm.
strip you of your rights because of what you said.
Hmm. Yeah, and I'm with you 100% on that. I think the only concern comes in is who is deciding at that point who's a bigot or not. And I think that's like right now I'm behind Facebook 100% of the way because I've seen it myself from
Yeah.
doing my ads and stuff like that. Since they've been really cracking down on Holocaust deniers, bunch of people who are like for the Holocaust. Like what was that one guy at that rally? The 6ME or 6MNE, I think it was on a shirt, which meant 6 million, not enough, which is a disgusting thing.
Yeah.
So I've seen that from my ads where anyone who's saying something out really offensive or really, not true, with, incredibly well documented, that's dropped off drastically.
Yeah.
Still happens every once in a while if they don't say any of the flag words that Facebook would kind of pick up on. But for the most part, Facebook, I'm happy with the direction they're taking.
Well, my only point is, like, as far as who gets to decide what's bigoted, like, the point is, it's okay that private companies decide what they want to decide.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I see what you mean there.
If it came down to the government telling Facebook this word is bigoted and that word is bigoted, then that sort of impedes on the thing. But it's like these companies are doing their own thing, and they think they're going to lose money if they allow this word or that word or this hateful thing to happen. So they don't let you do it. Like, that's not impeding on your free speech. That's them making a business decision to say, like, go say it elsewhere. You can't say it here.
Yeah, agreed.
Just like 7-Eleven isn't taking away any of my freedoms when they say I have to wear shoes in their store. Like, it's a free world, man. I don't have to wear shoes. Yeah, well, not here.
Remember when that was like such a thing?
No shoes, no service. Yeah.
Was that like, that's one of those things growing up. I see those signs all the time. Saw those signs all the time. You barely see it anymore. But I'm kind of trying to think if that was something that was elsewhere in the world, or if that was a uniquely Canadian or Saskatchewan problem.
I don't know. But yeah, that was everywhere.
Yeah. That's strange. I also remember seeing signs that they used to have all the time. Do you remember seeing the no spitting signs?
I don't know. No
I didn't remember them either, but then I was talking to someone and they're saying, do you ever remember seeing those no spitting signs? And I was like, yeah, vaguely. When I was little, there's signs like for like if you're in the park or something, like there's signs no spitting. Now they take them down now.
I remember being taught it was very rude to spit in public. As a kid, my parents and grandparents especially.
It's interesting, some of those things, or the old signs like when we had smoking booze.
Yeah. I was thinking the other day about how weird it is that we used to have, like, you go to a restaurant and you'd have a smoking section and a non-smoking section.
Yeah, it's very odd.
Or whatever. Or like watching Mad Men and how they just smoke everywhere in airplanes and doctors' offices. I'm like, what a world. What a time that would have been. Back when cigarettes were good for you. To live back then.
You're kidding. I'm so healthy right now. Yeah, because I remember like my parents would get so annoyed because we go into the non-smoking section that would be right beside the smoking section. So there's no point. Like the booths are like right beside each other. I remember it was a big thing when they stopped allowing smoking in bars. People were really upset. But then, like all the progress that we made in Canada, and I agree with it, even though like I do enjoy smoking and all that stuff. I agree that they just smoke around other people who don't want to smoke.
Right.
And I smoke pretty seldomly myself. But anyways, when we traveled to other countries, like when my wife and I went to Italy, and everyone there smoked. It was really strange to look at that, because you're like, it's kind of like jumping back to like Canada 10 years ago when that was the case. Everyone's just smoking like everywhere. I thought that was quite neat. And so you kind of have that contrast, like sudden contrast, and you kind of saw the benefit of progress that was made. But I am working on Matahari. She's so she's an erotic dancer in that was kind of like a spy in World War I. But like her character is really complex, and I think a lot of the problem with some of the books that I was looking at about her, like they just took her kind of later life, where I guess that's where the focal point was.
Yeah.
And when you just look at that, there's a lot of complaint about how selfish she was. And just from that perspective, which is really strange because, I hate to be this person, but if a man was in her position, we wouldn't think of her as selfish, which is really odd because she was very sexually promiscuous.
Why do you hate to be that person? I feel like you're on
I feel like it's cliche to say. That's the only reason.
Yeah.
But it was strange because I was looking at it and it's just like those books that you didn't have the sympathy for the character because honestly she's doing the same thing that a man in her position would have done. She wanted to make a career for herself. If it was a man doing that, he would have left the kid with the wife. No one would have thought any different about it. She's sexually promiscuous, and back then it's still, I guess, morally not that great, but they kind of didn't really bat an eye when a man was promiscuous.
Yeah.
And so it's quite neat to look at some of the reviews for those books and to see how a lot of people reacted to it. I kind of go, so when you look at her, how she became Matahari, it makes a lot more sense. So I started the book back there, which might give me an edge because no one really talks so much about her early life.
So you're telling me you're moving into feminist literature now? That's perfect.
I suppose it always has been.
That's cool.
Yeah, it's all been.
I'm all for it.
Yeah, it's all been maybe first wave feminism, I suppose, is what it would be.
Yeah,
it's closer line to that. Female having a main character as a female, I enjoy, even though the second main character in the two other books was a man. I don't know. I enjoy writing female characters more. I think I have more of a sympathy for them as well.
That's interesting. I also like writing female characters, but I have a hard time. I just have a hard time with external pressures being like, well, in like today's world, is it even okay for a dude to be writing from a female perspective? Like sometimes I think I have no idea. Well, obviously I have no idea what a woman is thinking or going through. But sometimes I feel like, I don't know. Like in my collection of short fiction, I think half the stories have a female lead. Mama, yeah. And I'd like to think I'm writing in as close to a feminist mode as I can. That is, I'm not trying to put a male twist on a female. I want to be as authentic as I can. So I spend a lot of time with, I have a lot of friends who are women who are also writers. So I share those stories with them before I show them to anyone else because I don't want to perpetuate the patriarchal oppression.
Yeah, like I think like having other females read it, like so Kelsey, I'd always read the books to her. And so there were some cases where she'd say, like in this case, a woman wouldn't think like that or a woman wouldn't do that. That's more of a masculine attempt at it. Like in this one, Daughters of Marburg, there's kind of a romantic scene and I wrote it really cliche. And so, but cliche more so from how a man would think a romantic setting would be from a woman's perspective. And so my wife was saying, don't focus on his body, focus more on the closeness. Like she could feel his body heat, right? And moving more into the emotion of it rather than the physical description of it.
Right.
So that helped quite a bit. But yeah, if you're writing from a female perspective, having a female look over it is imperative.
Yeah. I also read from, like, most of my favorite authors are women writers, especially fiction. So I've read a lot of female protagonists, like, well, Alice Munro and Margaret Atwood, Sheila Heti, and, well, just, yeah. Like, on my shelf, fiction-wise, there's probably 3 female writers to every 1 male. I don't know why that is. I used to think it was because I grew up with 3 sisters and was more interested in the female perspective, but I don't know. It's just for me. I don't know. I've always enjoyed that perspective, like Anne Tyler and Carol Shields, and like most of the novelists I read are women authors.
Yeah. Well, I think like any good writing places you regardless of gender or sex. You can kind of understand, like, if you can sympathize with the character, regardless of what sex they are. That's a good writer. But Margaret Atwood retweeted you, didn't she?
Yeah, she did.
That's pretty exciting.
Twice.
Twice.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I was keeping that blog where I was eavesdropping on people.
Oh yeah.
Found dialogue. It's still up, but I haven't done any for a long time. But yeah. So the premise was I heard these 2 people talking in chapters. This is what started it. One dude was like, "Do you think you can tell a story using only dialogue?" And the guy's like, "I think that's called a screenplay." And the other guy's like, "No, I'm talking like no stage directions, no anything, just straight 2 people talking with." And the guy's like, "I don't know. We should try it," or something like that. And so that was the first entry into the whole thing. I was like, I'm going to do it. So I titled each section, like, that one was just called At Chapters by the Puzzles. And then I transcribed their conversation as close to verbatim as I could muster. And that was it. And then so I started paying more attention to like strangers' conversations everywhere. Everywhere I went. I was in university, so I was sitting there a lot. Lots of them came from there, and I did homework at Starbucks, so lots came from there. And I was riding the bus, so there were strangers everywhere at that time in my life. Like now, I don't really hang around with strangers talking. But anyway, there was one where I was at the Science Center at this. This was quite a few years ago, but there was a Titanic exhibit. And this kid said to another kid, they were like 15 years old or whatever. He's like, "You know what I can't figure out about the Titanic movie? You know what I thought was weird about the Titanic movie?" And the guy's like, "What?" He's like, "They didn't show Johnny Cash even one time." And the guy's like, "What are you talking about?" And he's like, "I'm pretty sure Johnny Cash was the entertainment on the Titanic." And the other guy's like, "I'm pretty sure that's not true. Was he even alive when the Titanic sank?" And then they're like, "I'm going to Google it when I get home." Sorry. And so that was one of the entries. And that's the one Margaret Atwood retweeted that to her. She had like 400,000 followers back then.
Crazy.
Okay, but I missed part of the story because there was another conversation. This is the first time she retweeted it. I was at the cafeteria at the university, and I heard 2 people talking. "How's it going? What classes are you taking?" "I'm in an English class." And they were like, "What are you reading?" And they're reading. She said, "I'm reading Margaret Thatcher." And the other woman was like, "Oh, Margaret Thatcher in an English class? What kind of books does she write?" And then the woman was like, "Oh, she writes all kinds of books. She's written poetry and novels and short fiction." And she's like, "We're reading a novel right now. I can't get enough of it. It's awesome." And then the other woman is like, "Do you mean Margaret Atwood?" And she's like, "Yeah, Margaret Atwood. What did I say?" Margaret Thatcher. "Oh, who is Margaret Thatcher?" England or whatever. So then I sent that one directly to Margaret Atwood on Twitter, and she retweeted that one, which was awesome. But then it was 2 weeks later, she retweeted the Titanic one without my prompting, and she said, "This has been my daily cackle for the past 2 weeks."
Nice.
Which it seemed to me that meant Margaret was reading my blog every day for 2 weeks, which made me feel fucking cool. Oops,
Okay.
say the F word.
No fucking swearing on my podcast, Tim. No
Okay,
fucking
sorry.
That is fantastic.
That was cool. And then I like took that chance to slide into her DMs, and I asked her some questions about writing. Like I knew that I've heard rumors that she's not the like friendliest as far as interviews go and stuff. But she answered about 3 of my questions over the span of 3 days, whatever.
Wow.
I just asked about her revision process. Have you ever written anything and been happy with it on the first draft? And she said no, never. And then she sent me a haiku. She said, "This is the closest I got, but I changed one word the next day," or something like that. Yeah, that's pretty cool. I felt
that's awesome.
Next to famous.
That is so cool. So, like, did your blog explode after that?
Yeah, I mean, not in the. Yeah, compare like before, I was getting hundreds of views a week ish, and then after that, like that day, I got like 100,000 clicks on it or whatever. The first time she did it, and then yeah, for a while, I'd have thousands of people looking a week. But I kind of petered out on it because it's hard to like find actual interesting conversations. And just got too busy, and yeah.
That's fun.
So it didn't like go viral as they say into the millions or anything, but I think I have close to 100,000 views on it.
That's exciting though.
Kind of. I think about it a lot. Like sometimes, well, if I'm in wherever Valley Village and I hear some weird people talking, I think I should start it up again. But it's kind of like to just because I had to be constantly aware of the people around me. Like now, if I'm walking around the lake or at Starbucks, I just ignore everybody around me. But when I was trying to produce one a day or however many, I felt so like focused on these strangers. It made me start feeling kind of weird, but it was fun too. And it helped a lot, I think, with writing dialogue because I was paying attention to the ways people speak back and forth. So I think it was, as far as writing fiction goes, it helped me like hone my dialogue skills.
Yeah, that's interesting. There was a writer once. I can't remember his name, but for him to be able to write or to learn to write, what he did is he took someone's book that he liked and wrote it out word for word so that he got used to the flow of it and how to write it. And then from there, he wrote books. I thought it was quite a neat way to do it.
Interesting.
I think there'd be a lot of time just to write someone else's book out word for word, but
man, it would take forever.
Well, this was fun.
Yeah, it was.
Sorry, what were you saying?
No, we can end there. I was just gonna say I could see how that typing out someone else's stuff. I could see how that could get your brain getting into like when I'm stuck, especially on a fictional piece. I mean, my novel is fictional in a way, but it's more not. But like if I'm stuck on a story, I'm not sure quite what to do or whatever. I find that just like reading some short stories or whatever, just getting into the flow of someone else's work sometimes jogs my brain in my own story. But then I worry about, am I just copying this style? But I don't worry too much about that either.
It's weird how writing uses a different part of your brain.
Yeah.
Like it's strange how like something like that can kind of be dormant and then you use it in that way. It's like it's like you don't. It's like sometimes when you're writing, you can almost feel that part of that brain active. I don't know if you get that sensation or not, but sometimes when you're there and you're in that zone, it's like you almost feel like you're in this like in the zone, I guess. But yeah. Well, we'll have to do this again sometime.
Okay.
But we'll
it was fun. I've never been on a podcast before.
It's been lots of fun to do. I've had conversations with people like otherwise I would never meet.
Yeah.
Like I'm not getting tons of views or anything like that, and I'm not too worried about that because I mean, like I did a couple podcasts with some guys in Ireland that were some really profound discussions, that like life-changing discussions.
Awesome.
Like the guy in Ireland that I did. So his podcast is coming out this Wednesday. But his research into how bacteria affects your mental health was so amazing. And it's so annoying how often I forget about it. So like even like last night, I had Tim Hortons for lunch, and then I had a bottle of Coke with it, and then we had a Slurpee last night. And so I was getting so anxious last night. I was worrying about all these different things, worrying about work, worrying about this, and it's so annoying because it's like, oh right, because I had Coke and then I had a Slurpee later that night, and so it's anxious because the bacteria doesn't like that. And so he's talking about the vagus nerve, I think it is, that basically runs from your stomach up to your brain. He's also mentioned like when you get anxious or nervous, you feel it in your gut, right? Because the bacteria vibrates, and that's kind of how they communicate, right? So that's why your stomach kind of feels like that. It's because you, so it's really interesting. His science is a lot more profound than I can do it justice in paraphrasing, but yeah. So it's kind of been nice to do this and have all these conversations I wouldn't have with otherwise. But
cool.
Yeah, so it's good to have you on.